Hello and welcome to the CBB Supershow. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, aka Dub Deuces 85, and we're just putting the finishing touches on today's slate, moving into Wednesday, 2 days down, feeling very, very good. Got to remind you that we're coming to you from the FTN Network. You want to be a part of the FTN community, ftndaily.com, ftnbets.com. If you join now, you can use my code that is scrolling around the bottom there that is going to be available for at least a couple more weeks. Night Hoops, that's NIGHTHOOPS. 50% off your first month subscription over there on FTN Daily. That gets you access to not only the college content that I provide, but NFL, NBA, NHL, everything, tennis, NASCAR, esports, whatever you can think. Written content, tracker information, optimizers, projections, tools, DVOA, this, and partridge in a pear tree that. We have all the bells, whistles, but at the end of the day, we have one of the best Discord communities, not even one of the best Discord communities in the entire industry. And again, I'm seeing our Discord flooded with a bunch of green screens. Got somebody who finished third in the 222. Got a bunch of cash game wins there. We've got other people finishing third in the 33. I mean, it was just another good evening. One of the listeners of the show won the first Mania seat. Yes, I'm going to continue to call it Mania. Screw this king of the bracket stuff. It's the Mania to me. Anyways, they shipped the first seat. It's all around a very, very good start to the season. Not great, but very good. The only reason I say that it's not great is because we're going to continue to improve, and we're going to have a night where it's just all FTN subs and the community members from 1 through 500. We're just going to smash, and this is already off to a really good start. We're seeing there's just certain plays that we're super high on, and that in the past would have been mispriced and 70% owned. We're seeing them at a reasonable price and 15% ownership, 10%. 8%. Oliver Mqua was somebody we were really high on today. Had a very fantastic matchup against Pember, and he definitely did some serious damage there at 15%. So we're going to continue to plug along here. So make sure if you are curious about the community and the content that you at least sign up for that 1 month to get the 50% off, see what we're about. If you don't like the content, fair enough. You don't have to keep it. But I think if you join, you see what our community is about, you see the type of content that we provide, I think you'll find that you really, really like it, and you're going to enjoy the additional padding of the bankroll that happens when you are a member of FTN. So I appreciate the continued support as well. The show has been doing some pretty solid on-demand views. If you're watching live, please make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you guys comment, talk throughout the show. I read the comments. Share it, post it onto your socials, retweet, all that good stuff. All of that, as little and minuscule as it might seem, it really, really does help us. Gets it in front of more eyeballs, which inevitably helps the show, on the platform, and the site grow. Also, if you're watching on demand, make sure you drop a comment so I go back and look at those as well. All right, so we go from the 12-game slate. We go from an 11-game slate. We get a little bit of a reprieve, an opportunity to take a breath here. The Wednesday slate starts at the more usual time, 4 p.m. PST, 7 p.m. EST, instead of that half an hour early. Sometimes that messes people up. And then we're also looking at a 5-game slate here on DraftKings, which is what we're going to focus on. Also, we'll look over at PrizePicks. There wasn't a lot last night. It kind of didn't happen until the morning. So I'll look at the board. If there's anything that sticks out today, we'll look at it, as well as props and betting. How about last night talking about DePaul, when we were looking through their the odds and stuff? It's like, why would DePaul be double-digit favorites against anyone? They could barely beat non-D1 teams. And they ended up losing outright. So hopefully you guys got a chance to bet that one. Also a fairly embarrassing loss for Vanderbilt, double-digit favorites. I know they were missing 3 key figures there, but I think Coach Stack is I think he's just at this point, it's not going to work out for him at Vanderbilt. I now can confidently say I think Vanderbilt and Coach are not going to be long for this world. And DePaul just as good as they're going to be for DFS purposes, because they're going to get ramrodded a lot. They have players who are cheap and worked out for us today. My man Jaden Henley did pretty well, 4X. Cam Carter had a big game. Just some really bad teams out there that we're already identifying. And in the ACC as well. Obviously, everyone knows Louisville, but check and see. Notre Dame really had to dig deep and get a big game from Marcus Burton to end up beating Niagara. So there's going to be some pretty bad teams here by far. But there's also some really, really high-level teams this year and a lot of parity. But upsets are certainly going to be a thing that we see a lot yet this year. We already saw it yesterday on a bigger scale with JMU beating Sparty. Today on a much smaller scale with Vanderbilt and DePaul losing. All right, let's get into this 5-game slate. This show will be a much quicker version just because of how small it is. Canisius versus Syracuse will kick us off here. Syracuse comes in at 13.5-point favorites. Total just a tick below 150, sitting there at 149. Now, we have the exhibition games that we're looking at of these teams to get an idea. At this point, some of these teams have already played a game. Syracuse did play New Hampshire on Monday. Did get a little bit of a push from New Hampshire, which was interesting, right? 83-72. You would have expected them to win a game like that a lot more. Looking at the Syracuse roster, no surprise, running a somewhat shorter rotation, which is what we can kind of expect or have come to expect for this Syracuse team, regardless of who is coaching them. They did get Kyle Cuffey 23 minutes, which I thought was significant. Is the Kansas transfer that from Harlem, a lot of upside. The fact that he played 23 minutes and was pretty solid, 8 points, 4 rebounds, had a steal, did foul out in that time, but they're definitely going to be using him a lot. And it's going to be pretty typical, I think, with Chris Bell, who did start of him just like last year, where he'll be starting and he'll probably be playing like 15 to 20 minutes. Like I really highly doubt he's going to be long for playing big minutes. So a guy like Kyle Cuffey, a guy like Malik Brown, those guys are going to see minutes and they're going to run with a smaller lineup, which is exactly what they did against New Hampshire. The starting 5 for Syracuse was J.J. Starling, Justin Taylor, Judah Mintz, Chris Bell, and Naheem McLeod. McLeod playing just 10 minutes in that one. Judah Mintz had a 30% usage rate, 20 points, 9 of 11 from the foul line, 3 points, 3 assists, 3 steals. Judah Mintz is going to be the alpha of this team. Adding J.J. Starling was a big deal. Some struggles. He had 10 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, and a steal. Did shoot 3 of 9 from 2-point field goals, 0 for 4 from long range. Definitely going to need to see more from him. Justin Taylor was solid with 14 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals, and a block. Again, Bell did very little. Naheem McLeod did very little, but Quadir Copeland played 27 minutes off the bench. He had 13 rebounds. That's noteworthy. Malik Brown had 10 points, 6 rebounds, 4 steals. 3 different players off the bench played over 22 minutes. So the Syracuse team definitely has some guys on it that are going to be reliable fantasy options. When you look at the pricing for Syracuse on DraftKings, you might kind of do a double or a triple take because you're going to see Judah Mintz very high priced at 9.3. That's to be expected. But then it just torpedoes down below 6K, and you don't have a single other player above 5.7, which means we're going to be able to mini stack this Syracuse team for reasonably cheap prices if we want to. Now, there are 2 other players that will eventually be relevant for this team. Benny Williams, who is on suspension for violation of team rules or whatever, and Chance Westry, who just transferred over, has a lower body issue that has kept him out. I don't think we'll see him here against Canisius, but there is the potential for him to do that. And I do think Westry is going to be a big time 20, 25 minute, 30 minute type of player for this team when he eventually does get healthy. You have J.J. Starling there at 5K. That's the likely player we see get a lot of ownership because people remember Starling from last year when he played for Notre Dame, played a big role for them, started out really pretty good for his first season, and then he just went backwards from there. You are going to be getting, 30 minutes from Starling here at 5K. Makes a lot of sense. Malik Brown at 5.7 makes a ton of sense. He had a lot of flash games last year when he got 25 plus minutes. His fantasy point per minute numbers skyrocketed, but there were several games where he'd play 4, he'd play 6, he'd play 12. I don't think he gets jerked around like that this year, so I feel a lot more confident playing Malik Brown than I ever have before. Naheem McLeod at 3.8, not too sure about that one. Copeland at 3.3, certainly looking there. I could see that working out. And then Kyle Cuffey at 3K, who I just like Cuffey. I think he's a really strong play. I do expect him to continue to play these kind of minutes that we saw in that last game until Westry returns. Cuffey's just, I mean, if you know, Kansas lost 4 or 5 really talented players just because they didn't have minutes for them, and Cuffey was one of those guys. So I do think he excels here for Syracuse, and he is somebody that I'm really highly considering. With this value, you can play Judah Mintz as well, because I think Mintz is just going to end up putting up like 35 to 40 with regularity, especially against a team like Canisius that's probably going to give up a whole hell of a lot of points. So Syracuse mini stack early in the season. Be prepared to be disappointed because Syracuse mini stacks, you know, they were really good in the pre-ban era of when FanDuel was popular. You know, you had the Gabinage, you know, teams of 2014, 2015, Tyler Ennis, Jeremy Grant, those guys, those are some names from the past. We used to be able to stack those guys up, and they did us very, very well. Let's get in here. A little less prepared for my box scores because I was actually still watching games when it was time to start. All right, just going to pull up Canisius for the box score against the mighty Toronto Metropolitans. In that game, Canisius obviously scored a lot of points, 97. The starting group that they ran with there, Trey Dinkins, TJ Gadsden, Taj Stevesky, Frank Mitchell, and Bryce Okpo. Okpo, very solid, 14.6 rebounds. A 14-point game for Stevetsky. Gadsden had 4, 11 for Trey Dinkins, and Frank Mitchell was a pretty big non-factor in 19 minutes off the bench. CM Utajanal, Devin Williams, and Yuri Fritz all played 18 to 20 minutes and contributed at a minimum of 18 to 20 overall fantasy points. So that is something to consider here for this Canisius team. I think that we're going to be able to target against Syracuse confidently. When we look at Canisius, I think we certainly want to just probably stick with the starting group. Okpo would be the one to stick out there at 4-3. Now, there is foul risk involved there going up against a talented bunch of athletic forwards in Syracuse. But what's likely to happen for Okpo is he's going to get Chris Bell and Naheem McLeod into some trouble there, and he's going to be able to generate some free points at the line. I really am kind of penciling him in as a potential main team play and the primary guy that I want to look at. Looking at rates last year, Canisius, highest usage player on the team was Tosh Stevesky at 25%, had a shot rate of 26% and an assist rate right under 19%. Trey Dinkins also was a starter there, shot 35% from long range and a 21% shot rate. Okpo was in a more limited role, did have a combined rebounding rate of 25% in his limited usage. Somebody who was at Grand Canyon a couple of years ago, really solid rebounder back in the COVID era when the season got canceled as a freshman. He was on his way to being a very talented player for them. So that's why I'm really kind of looking at Okpo as somebody that I think can compete at this level and will be a premier player for Canisius. So he is our cheap non-high major play of the slate here, at least initially. What's up, Johnny? Johnny in the house. DePaul sucks. Yeah, Northern. Good to see you, Johnny. I'm happy to see you're doing your thing, brother. All right, so let's move on to the next game here. We have Western Illinois, the Roughnecks versus SMU. SMU 18.5 point favorites. Total of 143.5. Also, we're going to start rolling in the Ken Palm scores and stuff like that into the content here like we normally do, in case those of you who are watching are wondering why. Just want to get a few games under our belt for some data points to be able to talk about a little bit more. All right, SMU, they played the Southwest Assemblies of God. It's a closer than expected game, 82-63, but they got it done. The starting lineup in that one was Zurich Phelps, Chuck Harris, who of course transferred over from Butler, Jalen Smith, Keon Ambrose Hilton, who was starting, significant, Samuel Williamson, who I expect a pretty big season from. That was the starting group. Zurich Phelps, number one scorer for them a lot last year, did his thing here, 24 points, 3 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals. Chucky Harris came in, took 10 shots, made 6 of them. He's going to be a high usage, high shot rate guy. We expect him to be 16 points, 3 rebounds, 3 steals. Samuel Williamson was not very good, 4 points, 5 rebounds. I think it's going to be a struggle for him initially because he was a pretty relied upon offensive weapon for them last year as a kind of a stretch four. He's going to lose a lot of usage with the addition of Chuck Harris, but I think eventually he'll figure it out. And he does enough in those secondary categories such as blocks, steals, rebounds, and assists that he'll still be fine long-term for this team. Jalen Smith, 4 points, 4 rebounds. As a starter, he falls into that dreaded fifth spot, the fifth starter spot that does a lot of fit bidding. So not really keen on him. But Keon Ambrose Hilton, I think, could potentially be a really solid fantasy option this year. 8 points, 5 rebounds, and assists for him. Took 6 shots, made 4 of them. The bench pieces that they had, BJ Edwards played 25 minutes, Tyreek Smith 20, Jaheim Hudson played 13. Tyreek Smith transferred over from Oklahoma State, originally out of Texas Tech. Somebody who will have a very high rebounding rate, can block shots, defensive presence there for him. BJ Edwards transferred in from Tennessee, former somewhat highly rated recruit, didn't get his opportunities there for the Vols. They bring him over here as a super sophomore. He's going to be able to learn under upperclassmen such as Chuck Harris and Zurich Phelps, but Edwards is going to be really good for this program next year. And he's going to get plenty of opportunities to see the court in a 20-25-minute role. And then you have Jaheim Hudson, who transfers in from Georgia State. Now, last year, Hudson was pretty strong, at least in terms of rebounding, 30% combined rebounding rate, 78% free throw shooter, 3% block rate, 2% steal rate, 22% shot rate, 22% usage rate, very key figure for them. Expect him to, if Williamson gets into foul trouble, which sometimes happens, or they just want a different look with maybe somebody a little more athletic, at least for shot creation, they might go to Hudson over Ambrose Hilton at times. So looking at the prices for SMU, Phelps predictably expensive at 8.6. Chucky Harris at 6.7. I think that's an interesting price for him to agree because we know he's going to be chucking a ton of shots up. Tyreek Smith probably priced out unless he is starting at 6.7. I would have loved to have used Jaheim Hudson, but I think they're basing a lot off what he did at Georgia State. So they do price him at 7.3. That's going to be a little bit tough to get there initially. Samuel Williamson, especially, only 400 more than those guys. You have to probably play Williamson if you want an SMU player. Samuel Williamson, you see, if you look back, there's games where he spiked 40, 35, 38. There, like I said, will be an adjustment for him with this Chuck Harris and new guys around him, but ultimately he is going to be one of the top fantasy figures on this team. Ambrose Hilton at 4.7, BJ Edwards at 4.8, Jalen Smith at 5.8. These are the other relevant, viable players who are going to get minutes. Smith at 5.8 is a no. BJ Edwards, I think, has some GPP viability. Now, if this was last year, he would just be 3K. And I know they're still pricing guys who are relevant, like our man Bello today for Fort Wayne was 3K. But they're doing a much better job of at least pricing guys up to where you have to think about it. So that makes it hard to play Edwards. I do think Ambrose Hilton at 4.7 makes quite a bit of sense as a starter there, especially if we think he's going to get anywhere in the neighborhood of 25, 26, 28 minutes, something like that. He's definitely a guy that we can look at and feel pretty good about, I think. This SMU team is to me, looks like they're going to be very improved. Western Illinois, they played yesterday. They lost to UTSA in overtime, 78-68. The starters, obviously it was overtime, so minutes from there, but the 3 of the 5 starters all played over 33 minutes. Those starters were James Dent, Josiah West, Joe Petrakis, Drew Cisse, and Quinlan Bennett. The 3 players off the bench who played 15 minutes or more, Ryan Myers, Tay Knox, and Shea Davis. They did have 3 other guys play, but they all played under 5 minutes. Joe Petrakis, that name, he played for Kansas State several years ago. Then he went to Western Carolina. Then he went to Illinois State. Now he's here at Western Illinois. Always been a very supreme shot blocker, rebounds fairly well. Just has been on a different team every year the last 4 years, which is pretty tough. But he's going to be getting a lot of minutes for this team, and he's going to be a primary option for them. Almost a 7-footer. As our friend Johnny in the chat says there, you just can't coach height, Walt. He's 6K. I think he's fine there. This SMU team, while they're going to be an improved unit overall, I still think defensively there are some holes that are going to have to be rectified. And DFS purposes, we're going to be able to still play guys against them without fear. Dent comes in at 6'1", West at 6'4". Those were those top 3 guys from their last game. West at 6'4". Looking at his rates, let's pull those up. This is his second year for Western Illinois. Last year, a 29% combined rebounding rate, shot rate of 16%, usage rate of 20%, block rate of 6%, draws almost 5 fouls per 40. Doesn't really hit threes or shoot them very often, but he did take 18 last year, enough to make people think about it. And he did take 3 in their first game on Monday. So something that he's trying to maybe force into his game a little bit. He's not a super tall guy, but he is very physical down low, and he's super athletic. 55% on 2-point field goals. So 34 minutes in that first game. You look at his logs last year, there were very few games, especially the last 2 months of the season, where he didn't log at least 30 to 33 minutes. So he's going to play a lot. I think he's a very good play, and the most viable Western Illinois guy that we're going to be looking at here for sure. Other guys who got minutes in that game, such as Quinlan Bennett, Shea Davis, Tay Knox, looking at their price, Knox 5'5", Davis 6K, Bennett 5'1". They did a pretty nice job of pricing those guys all to where they could do a lot of damage to your lineup if you're wrong about them. I think that Quinlan Bennett actually is probably one of the better values at 5'1", just because I expect him to play over 25 minutes. There were foul issues in that UTS game. At least 4 players had 3 or more. So that is something of a bit of a concern there with him. But for GPP purposes, you can definitely get some of these Western Illinois guys. And Western Illinois tends to be, at least in the past, not so much in the last game there, but they were a team in the past that played at a much faster tempo when they had Rob Jeter there. And he's the last year or so, he played a little bit slower. Now they have a new coach in Chad Boudreau. So they might be playing a little bit different of a pace now. But historically, this has been one of the faster paced teams in the country. All right, FA. Then we get to this. We let's skip that game. We'll talk about those 2 games in the Barstool Invitational together. We'll move on to the next game here and skip one. Texas A&M-Commerce versus Texas Tech. Texas Tech 22.5-point favorites, 132.5 total. Texas Tech, the restart of sorts here with Grant McCasland as the coach. Love Grant McCasland. It was so very good at North Texas. 31 wins a season ago, at least 20 wins in 5 of his 6 seasons there. Even coached 1 year at Arkansas State way back in 2017. I say that in jest, but can you believe that was already 6-7 years ago? 20-game winner there as well. I expect him to do very good things for this Texas Tech program. Looking at the roster, they have some pieces here that we're definitely going to want to look at. Pop Isaacs, I think, is the guy that is going to have a fantastic season for Texas Tech. Starts out at 6'6", which is a little bit of a higher price than we're used to maybe paying for him. Most of the time last year, we got him in the mid-5s. He started out as a 3'8", 4'6", really cheap player. Those days are gone. He's going to be over 7K pretty consistently the entire season. Looking at his freshman year and what his rates were like, 18% assist rate, shot 38% from long range, very, very sneaky 3-point shooter, 24% shot rate, and a 22% usage rate. Look for Pop to really take that jump and have one of those quote-unquote super sophomore type seasons. I'm really quite confident in him. I think total for this season, and especially here in this first game, in which obviously will be a big-time blowout, but that's okay. I think we're going to see a first game under McCaslin where he lets these guys, kind of play through it and don't get pulled after like 18 to 22 minutes. Let me just pull up their. All right, so they have a scrimmage, but I don't think I have a box there from an exhibition for them. Oh, actually I do. Okay, so they did have an exhibition. I thought I had one for them. That was against Texas A&M, not Commerce, the actual Texas A&M, which was an 89-84 win. In that game, Pop Isaacs was fantastic, and you love seeing it. And yes, it was an exhibition, and sure, teams are not, doing their full, plays and showing off everything that they possibly can. But Pop was fantastic. 6 of 10 from long range, 9 for 13 from the field, 30 actual points, 4 steals, 2 assists. He did get into some foul trouble, which caused him to only play 23 minutes, but that just shows you, hey, he played 23 minutes and he put down a hammer of a game. And just to show you how competitive this one was, despite it being an exhibition, Devin Cambridge, who transferred in, played 33 minutes. Joe Toussaint, who transferred in, played 36 minutes. And then you had 3 other players play 22 or more minutes, which were Warren Washington, Chance McMillan, and Lamar Washington. They actually pretty much stuck to an 8-man rotation. Kerwin Walton and Robert Jennings, who have had a myriad of chances to prove themselves to be worthy of more minutes, played 8 and 7. Kerwin Walton, it's just not working out for Kerwin Walton. Not the career path that I think a lot of us thought he would be on. So obviously Pop is the dude. Now his assist rate, you would think as a point guard, he's going to be dropping a lot more dimes, but he's taking more of a scoring role, at least from what we saw in the exhibition and what I've just been reading about with this team. He's just going to be a very high usage player. And I think ultimately he will start to, get that assist rate up and contribute in other categories. But if he's going to be a 20-point per game scorer, minimum kind of thing, then we're not really too worried too much about him having 5-6 assists per game. The rest will work itself out. They do have Joe Toussaint on the team, who is going to allow Pop to play more off ball at times and allow Joe T to kind of run the offense there a little bit more. He did have 7 assists against Texas A&M for what it's worth, 6 points, 3 rebounds, 1 steal. So in a facilitator role, perhaps for Joey T, that can work out just well. He also took 8 shots, but made just 2 of them. Devin Cambridge had 14 points, 6 rebounds, 2 blocks. Darian Williams in 18 minutes fouled out, 6 points, 2 rebounds. Warren Washington, no points, fouled out, 7 rebounds. And then Chance McMillan, who looked very sharp, 17 points, 3 rebounds. And then Lamar Washington, 13 points, 2 rebounds, an assist, and a pair of steals. So Chance McMillan at 5K definitely stands out as a play, especially against a lower tier competition such as this. Devin Cambridge as a GPP type of play at 5'6", I can get behind that. And then Joe T as a 4'9" starting point guard that's going to have his hands, the ball in his hands a lot. Absolutely worth looking at. Kerwin Walton at 3'5". We've been trying to make him a thing, and this is the year he's going to step up. At this point, I just think he is who he is. So we're looking at Joey T, McMillan, and Isaacs from this Texas Tech team with a lot of confidence too. This is a team that ordinarily we're not looking to stack, and since Chris Beard and even last year, they're just a very solid defensive program. They're deliberate, and under Grant McCaslin, who ran a similar style in terms of they're going to play a hard-nosed basketball. They're going to have a level of physicality that's going to make people uncomfortable, and they're going to play really, really high-level defense under McCaslin. So we're not going to be looking to stack Texas Tech games too often, but certainly a lot more excited about them this year than I was last year. I would certainly put it that way. Let's talk about the Commerce kids here and find out what we can get for underpriced options. Now, Commerce did play Texas A&M, got their doors blown off. The starting group for Commerce: Jerome Brewer, Alonzo Dodd, Kalen Williams, Tommy Lewis, and Casey Ugawakazi. Nailed it. God, that felt good. Those guys where their starters all played a minimum of 20-plus minutes, except Casey, only 10 minutes there. James Weathers played 20 minutes off the bench, and then you had 4 other guys play 11 or more minutes. In another likely blowout scenario, we're going to be looking at a 9, 10, 11 guys playing for this Texas A&M-Commerce team. Looking at prices here, Jerome Brewer, 5'9". He's the one that would stick out to me the most, not just because he played the most minutes, but you go back and look at rates from last year. Very strong offensive rebounding rate, fairly high usage rate, shot about 31% from long range, very strong block rate in his conference, and just somebody who, as a physical, slightly undersized center, not afraid to get his hands dirty. So that's the one that I would most look at if you wanted somebody from Commerce, but we're not getting a steep discount at 5'9" by any means. None of the real starters here, or at least the relevant starters, are cheap except for Uka Wakazi, who's at 4'1", but he's probably going to play 8 to 12 minutes even in a starter. He gets the dreaded 5th spot starter label. Really don't need to look at Texas A&M-Commerce. I know it's a short slate, and we don't want to ignore any team in particular, but we're not getting any of these 3K type plays on this team, and they're just going to get their bell rung in a big, big way. All right, so those are the non-invitational games. Then we move on to the Barstool Invitational, which puts the very exciting FAU squad in the mix here, coming off a big tournament last year. The Owls returning the majority of their roster, going up against the Loyola Ramblers, who has a pretty solid roster we'll talk about here in a second. And then ASU, who's does not look good, and Mississippi State, who is extremely banged up. Both teams, ASU and Mississippi State, are extremely banged up. So we'll probably have some value emerge there depending on how those starters shake out. Let's start with the FAU game, the first one. They are 4.5-point favorites against Loyola in a 143 total. We'll go through and look at this point. You watch the tournament, or if you're watching the show, you're a big time college basketball fan. So you know what Florida Atlantic did 35 wins a season ago, knocking on the door there against San Diego State, losing 72-71 as a 9 seed. We know the top 2 players on this team, Jonell Davis and Elijah Martin, high usage guards, solid enough 3-point shooters, 36 and 38%. Jonell Davis, for his size, had a 17% defensive rebounding rate, very strong defender, 3% steal rate, draws 5 fouls per 40, 87% free throw shooter, close games, give it to Davis. He's going to make something happen. Those 2 guys are obvious, right? But they're priced accordingly. I think the Jonell Davis price of 8.2, you can get there definitely on a smaller slate like this. Elijah Martin sitting there at 7.6. Now, he is technically a game time decision with a foot injury. He was questionable coming in. They updated it. I would be surprised if he didn't play, just because there's the talk of, hey, this is a hangover after a big season. Plus, they're going to be a marked team, right? Teams are going to be gunning for them. And Loyola is a team perfectly capable of pulling a quote-unquote upset here. 4.5 points is not very much. Loyola could very well win this game with their roster and the talent that they have and the way that they play. So Martin's I would be really shocked if he didn't play. How effective he's going to be with the foot injury, that remains to be seen. So that's why, yes, between the 2, if they are both, Martin is playing, I'm going to find the salary to go get Davis. Return our guy, Vladislav Golden, who had a couple of turns last year as the posh play of the day. We usually focus on guards for that designation, but last year in the tournament especially, we found ourselves with a lot of guards, and Golden, it happened to be that Kansas State game where he had 14 and 13, forever etching his name in the annals of posh play of the day history. So thank you for your service there, Vladislav. He had a really ridiculous offensive rebounding rate, over 14%, top 40 in the country, combined rate of over 30% as well, top 100 block rate, 6%, usage rate over 23%, shot about 62% from the field, doesn't shoot threes, but that's really solid, means he gets a lot of bunnies, yes, but he has post moves as well. Not the best free throw shooter as a 7-footer. play the hack of Vladislav game if you want to. That's going to be something, and probably one of the few ways that teams in their conference are going to be able to slow him down. We don't get the discount that we had last year. I mean, it was much more appealing playing him at 5'6", certainly, but at 6'8", he's obviously still a play. This Loyola front court, though, could stand up to him. There's going to be a foul game at play here, and it's going to be Golden who gets into trouble, or it's going to be one of the other guys. I don't think either of them are going to check each other cleanly. We'll get to that here in a second. You have Nick Boyd at 6'4". To me, that's a little too pricey. If Martin can't go, Boyd is certainly a play. Brian Greenlee at 5'5" becomes a much stronger play if Martin can't go. Temper expectations a little bit, though, because Greenlee, he's not going to increase too much from what we saw from him last year, which is typically the 4 to 5 shots, a couple of rebounds, maybe an assist, 14 to 15 fantasy points. And now that his price is like 1K higher than we're used to, we're just not getting that upside with him. So kind of keep that in mind as you go. We do have some discounted players here. Jalen Gaffney, who's been around forever, UConn many moons ago at 4K, certainly in play there. Again, another player that would be elevated, at least in terms of minutes, without Martin. So we'll wait for the news there. Same thing with Brandon Weatherspoon. Brandon Weatherspoon is somebody who I think can take a nice little step forward this year. He definitely showed flashes, had one of the better offensive ratings on the team, takes care of the ball, can shoot the three. He took 113 attempts last year, which I think surprised some people, right around 35% from long range. And he is somebody that I could see playing quite well in this one at 4-1, perhaps a little bit of a sneak option even at that. They really only lose one player. Michael Forrest is the only guy that's gone. Pretty much just returned the rest of the roster. And while Forrest was a solid, senior presence on the team, they're going to be just fine without him. All right, the Loyola Ramblers, they have kind of not fallen out of favor, but I think people are less enamored with them. Obviously the Porter Moser year, Sister Jean, all that. They have a very fantastic coach in Drew Valentine. Now, Drew Valentine has been, since taking over of Porter just a couple of years ago, 25-8 his first year. Last year, they took a real big step back to 10-21. Now, the first year of Drew Valentine, they went to tournament. They did lose to Ohio State, but they had, some really strong players in terms of no stars, but a lot of continuity and just a team that knew how to play together. A lot of those guys ended up leaving or graduating, and that was why they took such a steep step backwards and just were off really bad defensive team. Drew Valentine's a good enough coach that I feel like this team's going to be much better, and you're going to see a massive improvement from them. One of the first orders of business that they brought in was Dame Adelkuhn from Dartmouth, who operates a lot like the Derek Walker of Nebraska. It's just kind of my archetype I use now of being a top of the key or the free throw line passing big. Someone even like Cameron Krutwig will be a little lazy and use somebody from their own program. You remember Krutwig, very high assist rate, great rebounder, jump shooter, could put it on the deck a little bit, just, did everything for this team. I certainly am not suggesting that Adelkuhn is going to be as high level of player as Cameron Krutwig, but he's going to have a lot of similarities with the play style that he has. Even my man from Rice tonight, Max Fiedler, you saw him have a 16, 11, and 5 type game. Like, those are the type of games that Adelkuhn is capable of having. Looking at what he did at Dartmouth last year, was also a pretty awful team, but he was a big time factor for them. 31% usage rate, 31% shot rate, combined rebounding rate of 35%, and an assist rate, get ready for this, an assist rate of 28%, top 110 in the country. Dame Adelkuhn, also a block rate of 8.5%. That was top 30. Drew 6 fouls per 40. That was top 80. And he shot about 58% from the field. He only took 17 threes, but he made 7 of them. So just dangerous enough to where if you leave him open, he's not afraid to take it. Not really his game. Now, when you go through and look at all his in-conference in the Ivy League rankings, field goal percentage, number 1. Fouls drawn rate, number 1. Block rate, number 2. Assist rate, number 2. not a point guard, played as a center. He's 6'8", 6'9". He's not the tallest guy in the world, but a center with the second best assist rate in the conference. Defensive rebounding rate, number 1. Offensive rebounding rate, number 7. True shooting percentage, number 2. Effective field goal percentage, number 1. Shot rate, number 3. Usage rate, number 2. Offensive rating, number 8. Dame Adelkun from Gastonia, North Carolina. He is that dude. 6.9K. I'm all over this play. I just love him so much. He's these type of players like Max Fiedler and Derek Walker and these forward centers who just have vision, can make passes, can hit jumpers, block shots, just do a little bit of everything and can rack up fantasy points in a hurry. The nice thing about Dame is that he does all those things, but he's also able to be a featured offensive weapon. Put it on the deck a little bit. He can score in a variety of ways. He had a game last year that he scored actually 41 real points. That was just a phenomenal outing for him. Here, let me pull that one up because I want to harp about this kid a little bit more. That was against Columbia when they won 83-73. 14 of 17, got to the foul line 19 times, made 13 of those, but 10 rebounds, 3 blocks in 30 minutes, 41 actual points for Dame Adelkun. Is he going to put up 41 actual points tomorrow/today, depending on when you're watching this? Probably not. But I do think he's probably priced at a 6'9" here where he can put up a similar number, 38 to 40, as what we saw out of Oliver Mquah today, and a similar type stat line, as long as he doesn't get himself into foul trouble. And that's where I'm saying with Adelkun and Vladislav Golden, Tom Welch, some of these other guys, like it's going to be a bend, not break situation, hopefully for Adelkun if you use him. And if you fade Golden, you're going to want him to be the one to get into foul trouble. So somebody's getting into it. I'm not sure who it's going to be yet. We need to avoid it. Returners on Loyola, there are a handful here. Let me just pull up one of their pages. The Ramblers. Sister Jean's still kicking, by the way. Still kicking. I can only hope I aged that gracefully. Oh, come on, just open their page, man. There we go. Got to click this to click that to click this. If you only saw how many windows I had open. All right, so this team really just loses St. Thomas, who didn't work out, Marquise Kennedy, and Bryce Golden. We're basically amounts to role players. They bring in Des Watson, who I think is really going to be nice for this team from Davidson. We already talked about Adelkun, Greg Dolan from Cornell, and Patrick Mwamba from Oral Roberts. That's in addition to bringing back who ultimately was their best player last year, Philip Alston, who averaged 15 and 6. Alston had 30% shot rate last year, 28% usage rate, shot 40% from long range, block rate of 4.5%. So look out for this Loyola defense between Alston and Adelkun. It's going to be real difficult for some of these opposing teams to deal with their rim protection. A offensive rebounding rate of almost 9%, combined rate 25%. Philip Alston, looking at his price, predictably a little bit high at 7-1, but very much playable. Only 200 more over Adelkun. Certainly worth a look. Greg Dolan coming in here from Cornell. Let's talk about him. So they went to the Ivy League. A lot of times what happens with these Ivy teams, they only allow kids to play 4 years. So when they grad transfer, they can't stay. They have to leave, whether they want to stay or not. So what ends up happening is a lot of these really strong, productive players in the Ivy end up going to other programs because they can't stay. Greg Dolan, 43% three-point shooter on 102 attempts. Offensive rating, one of the highest on his team last year, 19% assist rate, 3% steal rate. This defense of Loyola has a lot of different weapons on it. Dolan there at 7-1, wedged right in there next to Alston and Adelkun. What kind of minutes do we think he'll get? If it's somewhere between 30 to 32, he's certainly worth a look as well. I still myself prefer Adelkun and Alston. I think they would be able to find a little bit more space there on the interior rather than a perimeter player against that FAU defense. Kind of just where my head is at with that one. Braden Norris also sitting there at 8.4. That would not be a price I would pay. We know Norris, he's capable of flashing with the 35, but he's also capable of putting up a 10. There's a lot of inconsistency there with his production. There's also an element of the pecking order having to be reestablished. And I think Norris is going to see a little bit of a reduction in his overall shots and overall production. So that's a step back for me with him at 8.4. It seems a little excessive. And you go back and look at Norris last year, it's not as if he had these crazy amazing rates. His assist rate was the best at 21% on the team, but a shot rate under 18%, usage rate under 18%, shot 36% from long range on 190 attempts, which effectively makes him a facilitator and, spot up 3-point shooter at times. Now, he did play the 11th percentage-wise, the 11th most minutes in the country. So he played a metric F-ton, as they say, on the floor a lot. But we're not going to be prepared to sit here and pay 8.4 for him when we have several other options on his own team for over 1K less. Shager at 6'9", Benchweiger, I'm good there. Tom Welch, we had him last year as a min price option early in the season. Then he became 5K. Minutes were all over the place. I think minutes, that's tough, especially with Mwamba, Adelkun, Dolan, all these new players coming in. Patrick Mwamba is somebody who's at least somewhat interesting at 5'3". If he maintains a 20 to 25-minute role, he was an important piece for Oral Roberts last year and a capable scorer, but somebody that I'm probably kind of taking a wait and see to see what this actual starting lineup will be and what the pecking order will ultimately end up being. Somebody to look at, who I mentioned, Des Watson, coming over from Davidson, played over 30 minutes a game for them. He's going to be an important piece, whether that's being asked to come off the bench and be a second unit scorer. Maybe he's running the offense. He can facilitate. He's a hell of an on-ball defender. Like, this Loyola defense is just going to be really scary good, to the point where when they're on the slate, I don't know that we're going to be able to realistically take players against them very often. I'm a bit worried about it. I think their defense is going to be so solid. Looking at Watson, last year's rates, only a 29% 3-point shooter, 19% usage rate, 21% shot rate. Assist rate was pretty non-existent, but he is going to have the ball in his hands a lot more, at least on that second unit or as a possible starter, and somebody that I do like and is still young and could make a jump here. So I'm paying attention to him a lot. The rest of the guys on the team, mostly just going to be role players. I think you're looking at a 2 or 3 man go-to type of thing, and then everybody else is either a spot-up 3-point shooter or a second unit guy that doesn't really do a whole lot for me in terms of DFS purposes. I do want to see what that starting lineup ultimately ends up being, but Alston and Adelkun are 2 guys that I'm going to be heavily involved with. Last game on the slate, ASU and Mississippi State. Yep, Sister Jean is alive and kicking, Johnny. That's what I'm saying, man. She looks better than both me and you, I'll tell you that. Mississippi State 4-point favorites, total of 133. That's pretty damn low. That's Texas Tech level low. Not going to be. I think the Loyola game is going to be really good, close. Like it's going to be like an edge of your seat type game. Mississippi State ASU may be close also, but I don't know that it's going to be edge of a seat. I don't know that I'm super jacked for this game. I think there's going to be a level of basketball played here that is fairly ugly. And I don't know. I think the seat's got to be scorching hot for Bobby Hurley at this moment in time. And there's really going to be a lot of unreliability when it comes to this Arizona State team. I will go over their roster changes here in a second, but man, I just am not looking forward to this group. The waiver situation for certain players is still all over the place. We know that there's been guys who traveled with their team just the other night going to Kentucky, New Mexico State for Femi Odekale. Still didn't have his waiver, traveled, but they didn't come up with it. The Adam Miller situation is very similar for ASU. As of just a couple of days ago, Bobby Hurley was saying he was super confident that Miller would get the waiver in time. He is a multi-time transfer, but not a grad. So we know that unless you get a medical clearance or a mental health waiver or some other reason that the NCAA feels you deserve it, you're just not going to get to play this year and you're not going to get a waiver, which they did warn about last year. Now, a lot of people are trying to use I had a coaching change, but they specifically said last year, multi-time transfers who aren't grads will not get waivers granted simply on the merits of your coaching change alone. So it's an aspect and a part of it, but you had to have another part, maybe a close in the family member sick. You had to move. You had, maybe somebody who went to a college closer to the home to be around family. Maybe you had some mental health stuff. There had to be another thing to allow you to get that waiver. And thus far, the NCAA has been extremely stingy. I almost feel like it's a revenge tactic from them to be like, yeah, well, you got NIL now. You want to transfer to whatever school you want and get a free one. You know what? We're just going to deny you a waiver to play again. So, and them setting that precedent tells me that we'll probably see a mass reduction in next season in 2-time, 3-time transfers who aren't grads. Because you're just not going to play. And it's going to be like the olden days, as they say, where you'll have to sit out. So, pretty good chance that Adam Miller does not play in this game. I would really be shocked if they delivered a late waiver here. Just seems very, very unlikely. Alonzo Gaffney, who is priced way too high at 7.4 after being min-priced most of last year, he's going to be out for a couple of weeks at least with an injury, so we don't have to worry about that. That price is just nutty. Anyways, Brent Cellabang, who transferred in from Tulsa, very good last year, definitely, but 9K good, 8.7 to be specific. No, certainly not. I know that Tolu Smith on the other side is going to be out, and Cellabang's going to have the opportunity and probably be a 25, 30 fantasy point game score on this team. But 8.7 is a real steep price to be expected to pay this. You do get Frankie Collins down there at 5.9. So without Adam Miller there to take usage away, Collins is somebody I'm looking at. Frankie Collins was the classic non-con hero last year, meaning he beat up on non-con opponents for weeks. Once we got into conference play, he started to really struggle. And there was a turning point there. They played Michigan in the non-con. He struggled. Then they played a bunch of teams like, Alcorn, Grambling, Stanford. And once they got to conference play in Stanford, and he actually did well against them. Then they played a couple more non-con, like against Creighton, San Diego. I think he put up like a 40 against Grambling, and then he just really didn't do much of anything in the conference play. So this is a good spot to look at Frankie Collins. All the talk around ASU, practices and beats and media is that he has been able to step up and is going to make a big leap this year. So I kind of want to see it to believe it, sure. But at 5.9, at least we're getting a steep discount that is a pretty tasty look to it. Zane Meeks also transferred in. He's there at 5.8. Bryson Long at 5.2. Last year, Bryson Long played for was it Houston Baptist, one of their top players, sitting there at 5.2. I could envision playing him. I think I like this team guard options. What are they calling themselves? Houston Christian now, right? Bryson Long is somebody who is a big-time shot taker and shot maker. Took over 200 threes last year, 43%, top 75 three-point shooter. He's going to be an important piece to the puzzle here for this team. And I do like that at 5.2 because I think he'll chuck an awful lot. I don't know what else he'll give us besides three-point shooting. He does contribute in assists, but not with regularity. And this ASU team, I just don't feel like they're going to have a lot of offensive efficiency. I think we're going to see a lot of unassisted baskets and we're going to see a lot of turnovers. So it's not as if we can look at a guy and be like, this guy on ASU is going to get me a lot of assists. I think we're playing Bryce Long at 5.2 with the idea that, yeah, he's going to take 15 shots and score 18 real. and basically pay off his salary with real points and just give us a few rebounds, maybe a couple assists, and call it good. Do have Jemiah Neal there at 5.2 as well. Sean Phillips there at 3.1 as a min price play. Kamari Lancer transferred in from the Ville at 3.5. So a lot of different looks here in players. It's going to be interesting to see what the actual starting lineup ends up being. But either way, it's going to be subpar. This is a ASU team that wasn't great last year, but at least they had some really nice plays with the Cambridges. And I thought that we could at least look to them like they wouldn't crush our lineup. This year, I'm looking at ASU, and I feel like if I play any of their players, they could really damage my lineup. And oh yeah, they do get Jose Perez, who transferred from West Virginia, transferred from this school, that school, just bouncing around. So he is at ASU now, and I guess we'll see what happens with that. He's there at 5.4, but really it's going to come down to seeing the starting lineup there. Unfortunately, it's part of that invitational, and we're probably going to have a delay, right? Or if that game runs long from FAU, and we probably won't get the starting situation for that game prior to it locking. So we know for sure Frankie Collins, Bang, Bryson Long, like those type, Zane Meeks, like those guys are going to play. So if you do end up going with ASU, it's probably best to take some definitive answers on players that we know are going to at least contribute or be on the floor. That's half the battle sometimes. Playing players who are going to be on the floor. That's usually how you put yourself in a position to be competitive, I think. All right, so Mississippi State, Tolu Smith, that's just devastation, man. Gonna miss like the entire non-con. Hopefully he'll be back right as SEC play starts, but absolutely devastating for this Mississippi State team to be without Tolu Smith. Shaquille Moore, a suspension, violation of team rules. So no Shaquille Moore. That is a interesting development. He's somebody that I think a lot of us would like to see do well. He's shown flashes in the past. He has the capability to be a good basketball player, but for whatever reason, he just hasn't been able to put it fully together. And now you see him, getting suspended on top of it, which is really just not a great thing. They did play, let's pull up Mississippi State's exhibition, because they did play an exhibition game against Southern Miss, which we did look at recently on one of our preview shows. Just got to pull it up here. Bear with me. There we go. All right. So in that one, they did run with the following starting five, which Shaquille Moore was in it for what it's worth, which is going to open us up for a really big freshman play that I'm super jacked about. Deshaun Davis, Shaquille Moore, Jimmy Bell, Cam Matthews, and DJ Jeffries were their starters. 4 of those starters played 28 or more minutes. Shaquille Moore played 30 minutes in that one. Wasn't great, wasn't bad, just kind of medium, but 30 minutes. That's a lot of minutes to go around to some certain players. DJ Jeffries had 11 points, 7 rebounds, 2 assists in 33 minutes. Cam Matthews, 9 points, 6 rebounds in 30 minutes. Jimmy Bell, 20 minutes, had 9 rebounds. And Deshaun Davis in 28 minutes really struggled, had 4 assists, very little else. Deshaun Davis at Oregon State did solid for us. I really wanted him to go to Washington. He chose Mississippi State, and he's ending up being kind of just lackluster. Off the bench, they played several different players, 5 to be exact, but only 2 of them played more than 16, and only 1 of them played more than 20. Who was that player that played over 20, you ask? Well, his name is Josh Hubbard, and he is a Mighty Mouse candidate, smaller statured player that is not afraid to shoot the basketball. 12 shot attempts, 6 of them from downtown, hit 3, 13 points. This is just an instant offensive play off the bench. Now, Andrew Taylor, who transferred in from Marshall, did not play in the exhibition. There was not a specific reason given, but he is expected to play here against ASU. And Andrew Taylor had a really nice career at Marshall, but really need to temper expectations because he's not going to come in here for Mississippi State and put up 40 fantasy points a game. So keep that in mind when you're staring at his 9K price point, wondering what to do. Instead, I want you to look down here to Josh Hubbard at 3.8, and I want you to play him in your main lineup, regardless of what happens with Andrew Taylor. Hubbard could start because of the Shaquille O'Neal news, or what more likely could happen is Taylor starts, even though he hasn't been around for the exhibitions. But Hubbard is a kid that they're going to use a lot. It doesn't matter. Even if they were at full strength, Moore, Taylor, Tolu Smith, like it honestly is just not going to matter. The kid's going to be so good that they're not going to be able to keep him on the bench. This is going to be a nice little kind of welcome, coming out party for people who maybe don't follow recruiting as much or exhibitions as much and aren't really sure. But Hubbard, at 3.8, I don't care, 20 minutes, that's fine. 18, maybe even as little as 15. He's going to pay off 3.8. I'm as confident about Hubbard as I was Bello today. As confident in like a Jaden Henley. He's going to be out there shooting. This is going to be one of those guys that comes off the bench and has a 30% usage rate. He's just going to be jacking, and it doesn't sound like he's going to be told not to shoot anytime he's on the floor. Coach Jans is very enamored with this kid, and as he should be. So make sure, if you take nothing else from this program here, that you write down or take a note or whatever you got to do. Josh Hubbard, 3.8, main lineup, top value play. Yes, 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 and yes. All over him. They are having a couple of other intriguing options. Another young player coming in Adrian Myers. He's min priced at 3K, didn't play the exhibitions, did not see a reason why. Probably not a DFS viable player this year, but if injuries continue to pile up and they need bodies, Myers is somebody that they're molding to be a 3-point shooting, 3-and-D type player. He's already one of the best shooters on the team, so they say from practice alone, but he's going to need to develop further and get used to the speed of the collegiate game. But Adrian Myers is another kind of future-esque play to at least be aware of. And then in the exhibition, there was one other player that played double-digit minutes off the bench there. It was Jaquan Scott, who played 17. He had 9 rebounds, 9 points. Somebody to maybe consider there at 3-2 with a Jimmy Bell getting into foul trouble as a starter, which seems inevitable. No Tolu Smith. Maybe a little bit lack of physicality down low. Need a guy who's going to slam the boards. Scott could potentially be that guy, and he's only 3-2. So Hubbard's my main team value, but I would definitely have some Scott in your jam lineups or whatever DK is calling their contest this year. Still the jam to me. It's still mania to me. All right. I don't like change. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm fine with change, but I'm just never going to stop calling their tournament the jam and the mania. So that's pretty much the slate in a quick, nice little, game by game. Here's what we're going to play. Core wise, Josh Hubbard. Let's lean all the way into the Hubbard play like we do here. We don't shy away. Pop Isaacs at 6'6". I would have been willing to pay probably 8. Just to let you know how confident I am in Pop as well. I would have paid 8K for him without batting an eye on this slate. And I probably would have even paid higher than that. And that's how extremely excited about the upcoming season for him that I am having. And then the third member of the core, probably one of these Syracuse guys. At the moment, I think Justin Taylor looks pretty solid and nice to me. I like Cuffy at min price. So at this moment, I'll say third core is Justin Taylor, assuming the starting lineup shakes out to be Taylor, Starling, Mintz, Bell, and McLeod. And we'll go from there. But at least it's one of the first games on the slate, and we'll be able to see the starting lineup, and we can kind of adjust. But do plan on playing at least 2 of these Syracuse values. What's going to happen here is we're going to end up having to pay for Davion Mintz probably because there's nobody else to pay for. No Tolu Smith. We're not paying 9K for Taylor. The 8.7 for Celebank feels excessive. We probably are paying for Mintz with this value and probably just taking Phelps for SMU because 8.6 for Phelps is really expensive too, but he's just going to throw up 30 at minimum. And this is going to be a slate where raw points just win the day. So expect a lot of overlap on a smaller slate like this. We can get a little bit different in places. Not rolling out the Posh Play of the Day until next week. I want 1 week of games under our belt. However, if we were to do the Posh Play of the Day right now, and this is not going to go on the official scorecard, so we don't count it, win or lose, but Dame Adelkun would be your if we were doing a Posh Play of the Day tonight, he would be your Posh Play of the Day. Do what you will with that information. That's what I got for you. Let's talk about PrizePicks. Let's see what PrizePicks has. Dun, 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 dun. All right. PrizePicks is acting up funny lately. All right, so the board is predictably got like nothing on it. So it's hard for me to give you any of that. They have a bunch of Mississippi State guys on there right now. Looking at Andrew Taylor unders seem kind of interesting, right? And Deshaun Davis unders. I would probably tell you to go under 11.5 points for Deshaun Davis. I think there's very little chance that happens. And then I would probably tell you to go under 13.5 on Andrew Taylor. But the right thing to do would be to wait until the board fills out more tomorrow. But that under 11.5 points for Deshaun Davis, that's a go. That's a full steam ahead go. I don't think he gets that. And I don't play very many unders. So if I'm telling you to play an under, then you know it must be fairly decent. Man, do we have any DePaul minus 12.5 taking the other side bets? Because that just was silly, right? That was a silly one. Let's see what we're looking at here. Santa Clara is minus 12 against Utah Tech. Jackson State plus 1.5 against San Diego. That one seems pretty advantageous. I might just take the money to take them straight up. Jackson State versus San Diego. San Diego does not look like they're going to be very good. So I am leaning Jackson State straight up in that one. And then Utah Tech plus 12 looks kind of interesting against Santa Clara. Let's look at props here. What do we have for props here? DraftKings. Man, only Mississippi State there. Deshaun Davis under 17.5 PRA. Could we dare? Could we dare take an under at 17.5? That seems mighty tricky, doesn't it? They also have the 11.5 point prop there, which I'm also taking the under on. So I'm kind of confidently taking unders, which I never do. But Deshaun Davis under, just that feels like a solid bet there. And I don't know that Andrew Taylor just steps on the court and looks like Marshall Andrew Taylor. Like, I have a real strong feeling that he just struggles. And our guy Hubbard's is going to come out and say, give me that with the 20 shots. So I think that'll do it. That's just a real quick one. We will be taking, I said it last night, but I guess I was confused and thought it was Wednesday and then Tuesday, and I don't know, but I know for sure today's Tuesday. Yeah. So there'll be no show tomorrow. We'll be taking a 1-day break. There will be an article, obviously, for every day that there is a slate. So have no fear there. We'll be back Thursday night for the CFB version of the show. Jake Kuchek is going to be co-hosting that one with me. We'll break down the Saturday main slate in a game-by-game format. Friday night, we'll be back here for the CBB version of the show. That'll be covering the Saturday main slate there. And then Saturday morning, 1 hour before college football lock, we'll be talking about the news, the happenings, the late thoughts, the questions, the answers, all that stuff, which means I'll be pulling double duty every Saturday until college football season ends. So don't be afraid to send coffee gift cards. I do accept those if you want to send some. I'm not a beggar. I ain't going to beg you for money or nothing, but if you want to send me some coffee, I do not mind one bit. Appreciate you guys for continuing to support. Hey, Aaron, tilt to win. I actually do lose sleep over you not winning, man. So I'm happy to see that. I'll talk to you after I get off of here. Thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate it. Best of luck tomorrow. Let's keep this going. Let's keep this train going. Let's get our third win in 3 days. All the green screens. See you guys back here Thursday night for the CFB version of the show. I'm out.